Welcome to the second episode of the Helderberg Companion Podcast. Helderberg is a three-part series exploring the events following the Helderberg air crash of November 1987, right up to present day, where many lingering questions about the fate of Flight SA-295 still remain. I'm Tim Apter, and in this series of podcasts, I'm joined by contributors from the three-episode series to go behind the scenes and give some aspects of the Helderberg story a little more attention to detail that we just couldn't fit into the 3 episodes. It's obviously a very long-running, deep and complex story. If you haven't seen episode 1 or 2 of Helderberg, I'm going to suggest that you hit stop right now and catch up before diving back in, because a lot of what we're discussing will be spoilers for the series. Episode 2 of the series roughly takes us through the events of the 1990s, from the published findings of the Margot Commission to the plethora of theories that sprung up in the media, and finally to the TRC special hearing into Helderberg in 1998. Joining me in studio today is Samantha van der Walt, who has campaigned for truth on behalf of many Helderberg families after losing her parents on Flight SA-295. Thanks for joining us, Sam.
Morning.
And via video conference from the UK, very happy to have Dr. David Klatzow, the forensic scientist whose many, many years of investigation into the Helderberg has resulted in what is arguably the dominant theory as to what caused the ignition of the fire on board the aircraft. Sam, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, you grew up in what we've come to, or I've come to call the noise of Helderberg, just information on information on information, and report after report after report. And I know that you've taken part in a lot of media surrounding Helderberg, a lot of interviews, some TV productions. Tell me a little bit about those experiences, because I know from our discussions in creating the documentary that some of it was maybe valuable to you and some of it was not great.
Absolutely. Considering that I was 14 when the Helderberg went down, the media noise was, very, shall I say, traumatizing at times, and other times very informative. But there were so many weird and wonderful theories that at one point as a child you just kind of block it out and try not pay too much attention. Then, of course, getting asked by SAA, do you want to take a insurance payout or want to try and prove a point against any other parties? It's quite daunting as going on a very young teenager. So those were very daunting days. And taking part in the production, TV productions, I was fine with that. It was just the aftermath that was quite crazy, because it seems to draw out all of the bug trolls out of the woodworks. It's just crazy what happens. I mean, just advertising, just the trailer of the series. So many strange and angry people come out on the Facebook group, and it is quite daunting.
Yeah, I think Helderberg. It's very polarizing, because it's tragic. It's very emotional, and in a lot of ways, kind of the way history is played out, it's led to almost factionalization of, various parties almost against each other. So I've noticed that with a lot of parties, it is quite polarizing, and I think what we set out to do with the show, and what I really wanted to do with the show, was be able to put information in a place that allowed people to sort of put aside the anger, put aside the emotion, and say, what do we agree is fact? What do we agree is possible? What do we agree is not plausible? And go from that kind of basis of 37 years of noise into a place of considered, okay, but X, Y, and Z, let's talk about it. And I was really grateful that you joined, because, without voices like yourself, Dominique, Mark, Peter Otson, it becomes very depersonalized.
Absolutely.
So I really hope that, from here on Facebook, et cetera, once people have started to see the series, that we can start having conversations that are more measured and respectful, that Sam is a person.
Absolutely. That would be great.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, obviously you were very young when the crash happened, so you wouldn't have been too involved at that time in kind of the mobilization and organization of the families as a group in representing the interests of the passengers that were on the plane. But where did you meet Dr. Klatzow, and what was kind of the origin story of becoming a force campaigning for the rights of the families and the truth?
If my memory serves me right, I think Dr. David got hold of me and via a phone call and said, we're family members and interested parties, and we all met up at his house in, where were you staying? Kensington, that's it, yeah. So we all met at his house. I think I was about in my mid to late 20s at the time. And yeah, we all just kind of try to work forward to assist where we could. Dr. David's always been the foghorn, as we say, for the families, and always kept the Helderberg in the zeitgeist.
Yeah. Dr. Klatzow, I mean, from speaking to a lot of the families, from Peter, Sam as well, you've kind of formed almost like a counselor, I suppose, in some ways, taking on sort of a lot of people's trauma and experiences surrounding Helderberg and being a champion, I suppose, in that way for a lot of people. What are your memories of, kind of first meeting people like Sam, people like Peter Otson, and how did that kind of like organization happen from your perspective?
Well, I had one thing and one thing only in my mind, and that was to find out what had happened to the Helderberg and what had caused the aircraft to go down, and to make certain that was kept in the public eye for as long as possible, despite the efforts of everybody. Not the family, obviously, but everybody in power, in SAA, in government, to shut the whole story down.
So, I mean, your kind of principal investigation, that was obviously spurred on by the whole event of, the Saturday Star being taken to the press council by Arms Corps.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about when you were brought into that story, and when you were phoned to say represent? I mean, what were your thoughts? I mean, was it an immediate case of you had a look at the facts, or you knew what you knew from the media at the time, and you were like, I'm in? Or how did you get started?
Look, I was phoned by Peter Reynolds, who was the attorney representing the Saturday Star. I think he worked for Weber Wenzel at the time. And he said to me, I want you to investigate what happened to the Helderberg. And so I got in tow with anybody who would speak to me. And I sat with a phone and a tape recorder, and I made certain that I found out whoever was involved and phoned them. But above all else, the most important part of it was that I had a copy of the Margot transcript. And that copy I sat down and read. And it was obvious from the starting position of that Margot was trying to hide something. And I refer to that episode on page 55 as the smoking gun. And Margot was clearly trying to hide the fact that there'd been a discussion about dinner in the pre-events that preceded this fire bell going off. And that placed a fire right at the origin of the flight, not outside Mauritius, which is where Margot wanted the narrative to take us.
I wanted to speak about that specifically as well a little bit later, but let's chat about it now. One of the contributors on the show, which I was very grateful to be able to speak to on camera, was Jimmy Mitten, who was one of the co-authors of the engineers report into what happened that night. And I know where we speak about things like dinner or look after us on tonight's flight or watch out on tonight's flight. I think a lot of your critics have made or taken issue with the fact that, oh yes, Dr. Klatzow is just seizing on one word that may or may not have been transcribed correctly, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's important in the context of a podcast like this, where we get to spend a bit more time on it, to say that this was not, in fact, your idea. This was the Royal Engineers that brought this up. So to say, oh, David Klatzow is X and Y, do you feel that's fair, or do you feel they're in a way shooting the messenger? Because this is not just a David Klatzow thing. This is a belief held by many people.
This was very much the view of the flight engineers. And the second thing, it's not about a single word dinner. It's about the statement, "Yissie, hierdie ou word nou honger." You see, this guy's now getting hungry. I wish we'd get our dinner. Wat het hy? What has he got? He's got the same old SA junk food. Now, apart from the fact that that has the ring of truth about it, that is a definite discussion about dinner. And the remark made by the woman has no meaning outside the beginning of the flight. It's useless telling the captain to look at the flight at the top of descent, because if he hasn't, it's too late.
Quite right.
So that indicates that, and it's not only the fact that there was that discussion, it's the fact that Margot was dishonestly trying to keep it out. And it is clear that he'd entered into an agreement that there was a discussion with Du Toit, and Viljoen didn't know about that. And therefore there was this circus that went on where Margot was expecting an objection, and in fact went on to try and elicit that objection. And later on, about 30 pages later on, Du Toit comes and makes the very objection. But Viljoen, who was not the brightest character in the box, didn't realize that he was supposed to make an objection. And Margot, and by the way, Margot's intention was clear on his opening statement. We are about to hear an excerpt from the cockpit voice recorder. Why not the whole cockpit voice recorder? Margot had already made up his mind that you are not going to hear the whole thing.
I think that's very relevant. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of draw special attention to in this session was, it's 2025. It's very, very easy for us to Google a copy of the transcript, Google a recording of the tape. All of this stuff is out there on the internet. But at the time of the Margot Commission, and Sam was saying, right into the 90s when you were doing your investigation, how secret was this information? These things were under lock and key, were they not?
Well, the SAA was not forthcoming. I will say this, the chief engineering fellow at SAA, I thought played quite a cunning game. He said to me I could come and listen to the tape, and he put the tape down in front of me. He said, you can't copy it. So he put the tape down in front of me, and I listened to it, but he immediately left the room and disappeared, which I took to mean that, and then whether I took it to mean it or not, I tape recorded that tape,
the transcript,
and that's where I got the notion that there was this discussion about dinner, which is crucial. And the other pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that fit into that is the missing ZUR tape, of course, and the discussions from 3 different unrelated sources that there was a prior conversation about wanting to land, which indicated that there'd been an event, which I say was a fire, shortly after they took off from Taipei.
Absolutely. And Sam, for you, hearing Jimmy Mitten, relay this story, which, I suppose, we've all read the flight engineer's report, and for the viewers at home, you can too. These things are out there on the internet for all to see. How did it feel for you to be able to kind of see firsthand, another person recount the same story that David's been putting out there for many, many years now?
Yeah, it was actually great because I've never met Mr. Mitten, and hearing him actually explain how they were expecting a pat on the back from Judge Margot, and then were promptly told to drop everything that they'd brought up in that report was quite mind-blowing to me. It's different hearing it in first person, so no offense, Doctor, but you have told us the story over and over again, but to hear the actual fact that Margot stood in the doorway and was observing them to see that obviously the protocol was followed that he wanted followed, and that SAA was not to be brought into disrepute.
Yeah. Aside from, these things that we cover quite a lot in the show, such as dinner, the entire conversation around dinner, looking after the flight, the placement of the CVR, Mitten and the Engineers Association sort of catching on to this, submitting the report being quashed, all of this is very significant. And, whether you agree with Dr. Klatzow's kind of combined body of work on the 2-fire theory or not, you cannot sort of very easily say, okay, well, this didn't happen. You can't dismiss it. Yeah. But that said, Doctor, there were a few things that we didn't really have time to include as well. And one of the ones that I wanted to speak about was Captain Ace himself. Jimmy Mitten had said to us, or said to me in conversation as well, that there were many aspects of Ace's flightworthiness, questions around that from a testing point of view, an airworthiness point of view, as well as his health. And I don't know if you want to share any more information around that and your thoughts on whether it's relevant to the story or not.
It's very relevant to the story because Ace was a philatelist. He was very keen on philately, and he was part of a philately society. And one of the other members of the society was very friendly with him, and they used to get first day covers from wherever Ace went to, and it was quite a mutual relationship. And when he was going on this flight, he told this friend in the philately society he was going on a special mission. And the guy said to him, "But you're not well." He said, "Well, they fixed that. The health certificate that I got has sorted that out, because at the time he was on heavy doses of steroids, cortisone. And cortisone is not something you want your pilot to be taking when he's flying your aircraft, because it suppresses the fight or flight response in you. So when you're about to be attacked by a tiger, or you have an emergency crop up on you, such as this one, you want your adrenaline to be pumping. You want to be at the top of your game with your adrenaline pumping. And if you've got no adrenaline to pump, it's not good. So he should not have been flying. And when he said to Ace, "You shouldn't be flying," he said, "It's been sorted out by the medics." So that you should have. That was a statement I got from this philatelist at the time.
What's interesting to me about this is, and part of the reason why, we had that kind of information in the show in the early kind of stages of the editing, but one of the reasons that I decided to kind of, remove it, other than time, of course, was that, do you agree that maybe it's not strictly relevant in terms of whether Ace received an order to fly on, or do you think it's perhaps relevant in terms of some possible scenario where SAA wanted pilots flying missions where there were allegedly illegal goods aboard the plane that they could control? Do you think that's possibly the significance there?
The significance was this, that Ace was a trusted pilot. Not every pilot was in on this game. Ace was. And they wanted Ace to fly it because he'd flown these before. And they knew they could trust him. And they were prepared to jippo the results of his medical examination in order to get him to fly it. That's the important issue.
I think another important part of the story or the puzzle here as well is Captain Ace's wife, Johanna Ace. Sam, I know, Johanna Ace has never spoken out about the events of the crash, absolutely anything what she may have heard from her husband or not heard. But there is much conjecture, and David, you'll probably also be able to fill in some information here, that she was aware that her husband had flown under duress with cargo that he had not wanted or felt was not safe to fly. And there is much conjecture that she, in inverted commas, knows something about that flight or about other flights, but has never spoken out. Peter Otson had, spoken to me during the filming to clarify something, in that there is no major drive here from any of the surviving families to prosecute Johanna Ace or pin her up and hold her accountable. What are your thoughts on her silence, Sam? And, I know you've never tried to reach out to her and, these kind of things, but what is the desire, would you say, from the families, from Johanna Ace?
Yeah, I think she must be in an incredibly difficult position, like stuck between a rock and a hard place, basically. And, I think as family, we just want to extend to her that there's absolutely no war against her and wanting to crucify her. We understand where she came from, and she also lost her husband, so she's one of us, part of us, and it would be amazing to have connection with her, but we can understand why not. Very much have compassion for her what she has gone through.
Yeah, I think it would be, I hope, Johanna, if you do happen to listen to this, or any of the Ace family, one day it would be lovely to hear your side of the story and your memories, and what you knew of that night, or what you felt about the whole incident. David, I'm going to throw back to you, moving on from that towards the entire sort of ZUR and SAA, or ZUR and SAA kind of network of players here. So as viewers will know, the ZUR tape went missing at the end of episode 2, missing, over-recorded, however you want to put it. But regardless of what actually happened there was a trend, or maybe you could say a pattern afterwards, of certain members that had been connected to the whole story receiving promotions or contracts, or kind of moving upwards in terms of their career arcs afterwards. Do you have anything to say about that, or any insights that you could add?
Yeah, well, it was rather remarkable that Vernal Nadel, who was the operator that evening, became in very short order the area manager in, I think it was Miami. It was a rather meteoric rise. And he had a very simple job, just to deny that there was a discussion earlier in the evening. But we know that is not true now. We know that is not correct, that there were 3 independent witnesses who were aware of that discussion, that had no knowledge of each other whatsoever, and each gave the same story, that Ace had contacted ZUR and was refused permission to land and told to fly on to Mauritius. So he's clearly lying, and the tape never went missing, as you can see from my cross-examination of Mickey Mitchell. Mickey Mitchell was a consummate liar. He lied at the TRC, and he continues to this day to maintain that lie as his testimony forever and ever. I don't know whether he is compos mentis these days, but certainly when I cross-examined him at the TRC, he had no answer to the fact that when I put it to him that the tape had been given to him and he could never have torn a strip off the man who lost it, when that man was him. His answer was, I've got no answer to that question.
So we do dive into that at the beginning of episode 3. So hopefully you'll tune in and join us as we kind of interrogate that path that the ZUR tape might have taken on that night or the day afterwards. Doctor, I wanted to speak to you a little bit, on a personal level. You've pursued this case, I would say, relentlessly. I think Sam would agree with that. over many, many decades now, and not without criticism. You are a man clearly with thick skin, and able to tolerate, or maybe not tolerate, and certainly not enjoy people, sending criticism in your way. But I wanted to ask, do you, or have you ever at any period in your time investigating Helderberg, had any doubts or any sort of dragging sort of niggles in the back of your mind, but what about X? And how have you why have you kept on pushing with this? What has been your drive?
Okay, the first thing is that if you're going to be a forensic scientist, your primary objective in life is to search for the truth. That is absolutely without question. And in fact, that is true if you're going to be a scientist. Yeah. There's no point in cheating results if you're ever going to be a scientist with any value whatsoever. The second thing is that I've not had any doubts about my version of my narrative as to what's happened. And I issue the challenge now. Bring me a reasonable alternative explanation of what I've said, and I will take it on board. And if it is correct, I'll reverse my position. So that is out there. Anybody, anytime, anywhere can contact me and say, this is what happened, you are wrong, and this is why you're wrong, and I'll take it on board. The third thing is that I'm going to issue a challenge now. Anybody who would like to debate this with me in public, I will fly to the position of doing it, and I will debate it anytime, any place, anywhere, with anybody as to my version and my narrative, and I will put it up against their narrative, and let's see who comes out of the boxing ring better.
Absolutely. I really admire that, your sort of tenacity in finding the truth, as you say. And I think that is, with Helderberg, it's very easy, especially you look on the social media forums and these kind of things. It's very easy to become aggressive or angry. But I think what is very important is to remember that every one of the role players in this whole saga is searching for truth in their own way. They might be right, they might be wrong, they might be informed, they might be misinformed, they might be making a leap of faith, they might be acting on what they believe is fact. But I really admire that desire to search for truth. And Sam, I know you've spoken very, very highly of David. And the question I wanted to ask to you was, even if David were proven wrong tomorrow, would that change the way that you think about him?
Absolutely not. I mean, the truth. Well, put it this way: the exposure of the Helderberg would still be 4,000 meters under the sea if it wasn't for Dr. David. So he's hugely appreciated for what he's done for us over the years, and keeping the Helderberg alive, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tim, I want to add something to this, if I may. There's a wonderful book by John Steinbeck called Cannery Row. And in it, there's a character called Eddie Ricketts, who is the very famous doc of Cannery Row. And he said something which resonated with me and still does. Something was said to him which hurt him very deeply. And Eddie said the following. He said, "I love true things, even if they hurt." So if somebody wants to bring me the truth that I can resonate with and live with and see that I was wrong, I will abandon my position without a moment's hesitation. If your theory is wrong, and if somebody can show it's wrong, your duty as a scientist to take that theory outside and cut its throat immediately. There is no alternative to what you do as a scientist. You never hang on to a theory that is wrong because of your own ego. And I have no problem if somebody comes to me and says, "These are the facts that you've never taken into account. Bring them to me, and I will give it my honest input."
Absolutely. I think sort of we're coming towards the end of the time that we have available, but I did want to give you each kind of a forum. Also, maybe we'll start with you, Sam, just to, after watching episode 1 and 2 of the show, obviously you guys haven't seen episode 3 yet because it isn't out yet. After watching them, did you feel that there were any viewpoints in the show of other contributors? Because I know, with Helderberg, maybe with the exception of you, David, who's spoken to a lot of people, there are people that you haven't had FaceTime with, maybe as much as you've heard from them in the episodes. Was there anyone that where, hearing what they had to say really kind of resonated with you or gave a spark to something that you maybe hadn't thought of before?
Again, I must thank Mr. Rennie van Zyl for his input, because I just thought he was a lot more approachable in this episode than in previous interviews. I feel like he did actually much better in explaining things that happened in the timeline. And also to Mr. Jimmy Maton, who I've never heard from before or spoken to. And I think I may have spoken to his brother on the phone many, many years ago, but just that personal input, and it brings those reports and it brings all of the things that we've read through for years and years. It brings it to life, and it hits home their input and also their reputational integrity that they put on the line for this investigation.
Yeah, one thing I find it's as I've said before, it's very easy to demonize people. You're an agent of this or that agenda. But the fact is there were a lot of great people that worked on this and put a lot of their integrity and, their sweat and their reputations on the line as well, David included, as well as many others. So, there must be gratitude for those people's contribution. David, from your side, I know that there is much, 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 much evidence in this story, and we can't possibly include it all, or theories or links in the chain. But to the viewers that are watching this, what is maybe something, or a little bone that you'd like to throw them in terms of looking into, or a story that maybe we didn't cover in support of your work on Helderberg and the 2-5 theory broadly?
I thought that you covered it very fairly. And I thought that it certainly did not dilute the narrative which I wished to present to the public. And the second thing that I want to leave the public with is the following. It is a challenge. It is a challenge to those critics of mine to come forward and challenge me publicly. And we have a public debate about it. And anytime, any place I would like, and particularly Rennie van Zyl. I've got quite a few questions to ask Rennie van Zyl. And there's another question that I would like to ask, which astounded me, which is why the prosecutor at the time never picked up on Margot's attempt to hide evidence. I'd love to ask him that. I can't ask him that because he's a judge now, or he's a retired judge. But I would love to ask him, and I would love him to come forward and tell me why he couldn't pick that up, because it is to me so obvious that was an attempt to cover up things.
I think a good place to leave it for today. If you're watching and you've had some connection to the story, or you're someone that David has called out perhaps in this episode, we do encourage you to come forward, post on social media, send an email to the doctor, to us, and then let's take the discussion forward. On that note, we'll wrap it up for this episode. Sam and David, a huge thanks to you both for joining us, not just today, but also for participating in this project. It's been many, I think it's over a year of work for myself at this stage, and I just really want to thank you both for giving so much of yourselves to us and providing so much information and working with us to put your beliefs, your facts, your theories, your evidence, everything in a place where the audience can view it objectively. In the third and final episode of Helderberg, we kind of wrap this up and provide some of the contrasting views to David's theory and bring it all together. And we look forward to seeing you back here for the final episode of the Helderberg Companion Podcast directly afterwards. We'll see you then.